Hey there, I'm srcmake and welcome to the tutorial on CircleCI. In this video, we are going to look at what CircleCI is, and we've got an introduction to CI/CD in case you're not familiar with it. Then we've got this diagram that will show the flow between a developer and their code changes on GitHub and the jobs that are going to be performed on CircleCI. So this is just going to be a really quick flow to see how we can conceptualize all of this. And then we've got a basic Python project that we're going to set up. With that project, we're going to push it to GitHub, and then we're going to set up CI using CircleCI for that project. And after setting up CI, and we're going to go through this configuration file, and I'm going to explain how everything works. We are then going to test that CircleCI is working by making a PR, a pull request, and seeing that each one of the jobs that we specify, which is going to be a build job and a test job, are going to show up in the PR so that it's sort of automated and really nice. And after that, it's the conclusion. This is actually really important because we're going to see the next steps and how you can make CircleCI do a lot more complicated things. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. My recommendation is to watch me do this demo in this video, and then afterward you can come to this blog post and try these steps out yourself. And you can find a link to this blog post below this video, and while you're down there, hit the subscribe button to this YouTube channel. Thanks. So CircleCI. CircleCI is a service that detects when your code base changes, and it runs jobs that you define on the code. It's basically used for CI/CD and doing it in an automated fashion. So if you don't know what CI/CD is, CI stands for continuous integration, and basically whenever you have a code change, you want to know if the state of the code is still okay, if everything is still good. So that means, does your code still compile, and do all of your unit tests still pass? You want to make sure that your state of the code is always good before you merge into master or anything like that. Continuous deployment is what CD is, and that means after you make a code change and maybe you merge into master, you want to automatically deploy your code to where it's meant to be, which means you could deploy a server to Heroku or AWS, or maybe you've got a one-time job like a database migration, and you want that to happen automatically once you actually make the code change and your master branch is updated. That's what CD is. So CI/CD is incredibly powerful for any project, even your personal ones, because the automation saves a lot of time and it improves your workflow. And this is really useful if you have to work with other people, because you want to test if someone is using tabs or spaces, and you want to be consistent. So you can just create a job that automatically checks that every single time so that you don't have to manually check it in a pull request code review. So with that in mind, let's look at the flow. So you've got a developer and they're making a code change. They could be making a PR, which means a new branch, or maybe they're updating that branch because you requested changes and they made those changes, or maybe they merged a branch into another one. For example, their pull request was accepted, so they merge it into the master branch. All of those are valid code changes that we want to still make sure the state of the code is still good. So you make a code change on GitHub, and that will trigger jobs that you specify on CircleCI's computers. So on CircleCI's computers, they're going to take a copy of your code and they're going to run a linter if you specify that sort of job. Or maybe they'll run a build job or task, and then they can run the test for you, and then they can do things like handle the deployment for you. And for each one of these jobs, they can return the status so that you know on your pull request if a linting fails, so that you know not to merge the PR, or that it's not going to be allowed until all your CI jobs pass. So that's the general flow of things. And the reasons to use CircleCI specifically for your CI tool is because it's free. First of all, really nice. You can use it right now. You'll see I'm using the free tier. And if you're a big company, you can upgrade to a paid tier if you really want to. But free is free, right? It's not hard to set up compared to other CI tools. So I haven't used Travis CI or Jenkins, but you'll see after this demo that we do in the next section, it's really easy. And you're going to be able to take the configuration that I show you and just spin it off for your own project. It'll be really easy. And finally, many companies use CircleCI, so it's good to be familiar with. In my past two jobs, one of them being a startup that was worth over $1 billion, they use CircleCI. A lot of companies use it, so really useful. Let's create a basic project. I'm opening Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to copy and paste all of these things together with you. You can follow these steps afterward. Let's do it together right now in this video, though. So we're going to create a file named main.py, and we're going to copy this code. Oh, Visual Studio Code is advising me to do stuff. Let's ignore that for now. So we've got 8 simple lines of Python code. We've got a function named add. It takes 2 parameters, a and b, and it returns a plus b. Very simple add function. We've got another function named say hello, takes no parameters, and what it does is it prints sup world from srcmake. And then finally, we've got this thing right here that says if name is equal to main, we will invoke the say hello function. And basically, if you don't know Python syntax, this is if this file is called, then this block is what's going to get executed. So let's run this. This is our simple project, python3 main.py. And you can see say hello got invoked and subworld from srcmake shows in the terminal. Great. So that's our project, but any good project has unit tests, so we're going to create a new file for the unit test. It's going to be called main-test.py. And I'm going to copy this code into it. Copy, paste. So let's go over this really quickly. From the main file, which is this right here, we're going to import the add function, which was defined over here. We didn't use it in here, but we're importing it, so think of it as like a library function. Then we've got another function named test_add. Takes no parameters. It will assert that if you call the add function and pass in 2 and 3, that this is going to return 5. And then it's going to print add function works correctly. This will only print if this assert works. If this assert doesn't work, then our file will not, it'll throw an error because this assert fails. And finally, if we run this file, then we are going to call the test_add function. So let's run this. We've got another simple Python command right here, python3 main-test.py, and you can see that add function works correctly. So our project is set up. Now we want to push this project to GitHub. So next section, we're going to create a GitHub repository named CircleCI-demo. I'm going to create that with you right now. So click into GitHub. We're going to name this CircleCI-demo. No description. I'm going to make this private. We're not going to do any of this. We're just going to create the repository. And repository is created. Now we want to push our local code to this repository. So these commands will do that. Git init to make this project a Git repository. We're going to add all the files to be staged. I think that's the terminology. Then we're going to commit these files. Then you can't see that well. But this, we're going to say for this local Git project, we want the remote to be this GitHub repo right here. So we're going to set that. Keep in mind when you do this yourself, my username is srcmake. You're going to want to change this to your own username. And finally, we're going to push the project to GitHub. So we're going to do a git push. I'm going to have to put in my password, sign in, and it's going to push. And if you refresh this page, our project is there. I should have deleted this. Don't worry about this, but yeah, our project is on GitHub. So now we've got our project on GitHub. It's all set up. We want to set up CI so that anytime we make a code change, CI will run and we know if the state of the code is still good. So first thing we need to do for CircleCI is create the configuration file. So the way you do it is you have to make a folder named .circleci. So let's create that folder. Folder is created, and inside of that folder that you created, you need to create a config.yaml file. So let's create that right now. So in here it got created, and I'm going to copy and paste this code into the file in our local project, and then we're going to go over it. So let's see. So I'm going to close this so you can see properly. We actually don't need the terminal right now. Okay, great. You can see everything. So the version of CircleCI that we're going to run kind of is 2.1. There's an older version. You can use like version 1, but we should use the latest and greatest, so use version like 2. Now we've got a couple of jobs that we want CircleCI to be able to run on our project. And in this case, it's going to be a build job and a test job. And this is the way we're going to read this. For the build job, we want our code to run inside the Docker image, CircleCI Python 3.6. So basically, CircleCI set up a Docker image that already has Python 3 installed in it, and that's what we want our code to be running in. If you're unfamiliar with Docker, I have another tutorial on it, so feel free to watch that Docker video after this one. And once we're inside of the Docker image, we need to put our code somewhere, right? It's not magic. It has to live somewhere inside of the Docker image. In that case, the working directory is going to be home/circleci-python. This is just the name of the folder once we're inside of the Docker image. It really is not a big deal. But once we're inside of this folder, what do we need to do? We need to run these steps. First of all, we need to run checkout. Checkout is going to say, okay, you see the code base? We need to check it out and put it into this folder so that we can actually work with it. The next thing we need to do is we want to run the actual build command, which in our case is going to be python3 main.py, which is what we did before. That in our case is going to be our build to make sure that our project compiles. The test job is very similar, same Docker image, same working directory, same checkout. The difference is our step this time to run our unit test is going to be this right here. This is the command to run our unit test, which in this case is a simple Python command. But the thing is, in larger projects, like in a Node.js project, these steps are going to be a little bit more complicated because you're going to have to set up your project to be compliant with running your actual tests. So for example, if you were having a Node.js project, you'd probably have to run npm install somewhere in here to make sure that your project actually has the Node packages. You can make these steps as complicated as you need to, but for our basic example, we were able to make something very simple. So these are the jobs we want CircleCI to run, but we actually need to specify when to run these jobs and on which branches. That's what workflows are for. So we've got one very simple project, and in that case, we can just create one workflow that's named build and test, and we're going to run the build job, and then we are going to run the test job, and the test job is going to require the build job. So you won't run the test job unless the build job passes. That's basically what this syntax means. This is very important for CI/CD, and especially with the CD part, because when you are like on the master branch, if your unit tests fail, you don't want to actually deploy that code, right? That code is probably bad if the test failed. And this require would basically mean don't deploy, don't do this job unless the other one passes. It's just like a sort of control flow kind of thing, which is very useful. The other thing to keep in mind with the workflows, and the reason you need them, is because you want to be able to control which branches run which jobs. So for example, if you're on some feature branch, you don't want that branch to run like a deploy job and push it to the production server. You only want the master branch to be pushing the code to the production server where your Heroku, where you're hosting things. That's why you would specify different workflows for different branches. And we'll look at that in the conclusion when we talk about making more complicated projects. But this is basically what our config file is going to be. Very simple for our project. And obviously this is my own simple project that I set up here, but if you want to look at the official CircleCI docs to see what you can actually do in this config file, there's a link right here. So now that we created this config file, we want to actually make sure that CircleCI is listening to our GitHub repo. Remember, we made this private repo, and by default, no one's going to have access to it. We need to explicitly give CircleCI access to talk to this repo. GitHub's not going to let anyone just talk to our repo. So we're going to go to circleci.com. We're going to click Go to App. I'm already logged in, but if you're not logged in, what you want to do is you want to log in with your GitHub account. And you can see all of my pipelines right here. You want to click the Add Projects button, and you're going to see a list of your GitHub repos. You can see the one we just created, CircleCI demo. You're going to click this button, Set Up Project. And you can see that CircleCI wants to generate some automatic manual config file for you, which is a nice suggestion, but we just created it ourselves, right? So we're going to click Add Manually because we're doing the config ourselves. We don't need CircleCI to hold our hand on this one. You can see that I already have some jobs running from like previous tests. Don't worry about that. But now CircleCI is listening for code changes on our GitHub repo because we just gave it access. So now we want to push our config file to GitHub because remember, right now, GitHub doesn't know about this config file. So we're going to open back up the terminal, git add. What? Yeah, I did mean that. Sorry. So we're going to git add, and then we are going to commit, and then let's do a git push. So we're going to push this config file, that's the change to our code, to GitHub. If we refresh, we'll see that it's right here. Two things to notice. One is that if you look at our pipeline, CircleCI is going to be running our job because now CircleCI is listening for all code changes and it sees this config file, and so it's going to run our build and test workflow. And you can see that our build test just passed. Normally, these tests take a little bit of time depending on if you're using a free tier, or maybe you're paying CircleCI so they give you nicer computers, or maybe your jobs just take a long time. So for example, if you got a node project with like 1,000 npm packages that need to be installed, that would take a long time, but our simple Python project is very fast. The other thing to notice besides CircleCI is if you click right here, for this branch, we're looking at the code base for the master branch, you can see the state of CI right here. It's a really nice feature. So you can see that the build job passed and the test job is running right now. That's what this yellow means. And now we've got CI running, but let's test it out a little bit more. By the way, sorry, pro tip, a couple of things right here I should talk about. Pro tip, if you see errors, then make sure your config.yaml file is linted correctly, meaning you're using two spaces and you're not using tabs. That would cause like a lot of heartache. It did for me. The other thing is if you want this full code base right now that's working, there'll be a link right here for you in case you can't copy and paste it correctly and you just want to like fork what I have. I'll have that link set up for you. Next, let's test that CircleCI is working. So let's check out a new branch. Let's say we're adding a feature to this project. So we check out a new branch and we're going to add a new test. In this case, we're just going to go back to our test file and let's add a new line. And I'm going to make sure that the tabbing is correct here. And I'm going to copy this in. So we're going to assert that 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. Actually, you know what? Let's say 5 plus 5 is equal to 11. Let's just start out doing that. So we added that, and let's push this branch up to GitHub. Git add, git commit, git push. So we pushed our branch to GitHub. If we come back, I'm expecting this pass. So you see the check mark. This over here works. You can see that this job is running for our new branch that we just created. Let's create a pull request. Create pull request. And the interesting thing with CircleCI is you can see right here. So I'm blocking it a little bit, but you can see that you've got the build and the test job just failed. So you can see this X right here. And in the real world, what would happen here is you would set up this GitHub repo to say, if any one of these CI tests fail, you're not allowed to merge the pull request. Even though I'm an admin, but maybe you could set that up anyway. So what we would want to do is we would want to make a change, say 5 plus 5 is equal to 10, and then push this up. So git commit, blah, blah, blah. And now we're making another change to the branch. So CircleCI is going to listen to that. You can see it's trying. It heard that we made a change and it's going to rerun CI, which is really useful. And you can see here's the other thing. So this job failed, right? Why did it fail? We want to know that. You can actually come into the UI for CircleCI right here, and you can see these were the jobs. Oh, the test job failed. Why did it fail? You can actually come in here, and if you scroll down, I'm blocking it right now, sort of. Which way? You can see that it failed at this line right here, and so you can know to come in and change this line. Very useful, very, very powerful. This is literally the difference between being a senior developer and a junior developer, by the way, knowing how to set this up. So that's testing that CircleCI works. You can come to the blog post if you want to try it yourself. Let's go through the conclusion really quickly. So CI/CD is very important. We've seen how to use CircleCI to set up CI for our project. Our project was simple, but extending it to a more complicated scenario isn't that difficult. It's really easy. Just to recap, you set up a config file, you specify the jobs. For each job, you specify what commands you need to run once your code base is copied inside of this Docker image. And then you set up workflows to say, okay, for every single branch, I want to run build and test. For the master branch, I want to run build, test, lint, deploy. Whatever you need to do, you can set up. And of course, setting up the CD part is really simple. So if you wanted to set up CD, you could just create another job that will do some steps that will have commands to deploy your code to wherever it needs to go. It's all just commands in a terminal, right? It's not too hard. So a few examples of how to make the most of CircleCI and CI/CD is using CircleCI to run a scheduled cron job. This actually came up in the workplace for me at my previous job. We use CircleCI to run a report for revenue. So the marketing and business people, someone like that in some other department, wanted to know how much money we were making every, I guess, week on a project. And so we would have CircleCI run a cron job that would fetch data from the database, do a little bit of calculation, and it would send an email to those businessy people. And that was like really nice automation instead of having to like manually do it or use some other weird tool to do your cron job. CircleCI can do it. Then you can add different workflows for different branches. So for example, if you want to deploy the master branch but not random PR branches, you don't want to deploy some random feature branch, you could set up a different workflow. We sort of talked about that. Here's another important thing. So if you want to set up the process for CD to a staging server, that would be super useful. So most servers, you've got like a production server, but you also want to test out on some features on like a staging server or maybe like some dev server. You can automatically have that done just by creating a different deploy job and specifying that for like a different branch. Like a common pattern I've seen is you have a staging branch, and anytime you merge into the staging branch, that could deploy to the staging server. Very powerful and very useful. Again, this is like the difference between being a senior dev and like a junior dev. Junior dev only knows how to do code. But once you're a senior dev, you can set up these CI/CDs and make the project actually automated and, you know, have complex servers all over the place. And lastly, the thing that we can do is we can ask CircleCI to run our Dockerized projects instead of needing to use the native images. So for example, for our code base, we were fine with using CircleCI's Docker image that had Python 3.6 on it. But in a previous tutorial, a previous video that I had, I showed that locally we didn't have Node.js installed, but we could still run the test just by having Docker do the commands inside of the Docker container. Basically, we can say, here's our Docker image, and CircleCI, I just want you to run that. Here's the commands to do that. I don't want you to use any specific image. So that's going to be it for this video. You should keep an eye out for a more advanced CircleCI tutorial where we'll go through the process of setting up a config for an already Dockerized project instead of using like a simple Python image that they already provide us. And we could also set up the CD to a cloud host like Heroku, because this is kind of what I do for my own backend servers. If you do want to see that, please let me know in the comments below, because I won't know if this is what people want unless they say so. And if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter, do everything else. And again, go try this blog post yourself after watching this. There will be a link below the video. So I'm srcmake. Good luck with your CI/CD projects. Thanks for watching.